So my name is Rush Lilavivat. I am the tabletop director of panels at DragonCon. And so we talk about all things having to do with board games, role-playing games, um, anything having to do with paper. But today we're going to be talking specifically about role-playing games and talking about making characters, making NPCs and inhabiting them. With me is Dallin Elk. Dallin, why don't you introduce yourself real quick?
Hi, my name is Dallon. I am one of the younger dungeon masters at Dragon Con's Adventure League, and I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons for 8 years, and I have recently started just learning from Rush in terms of how to become a better dungeon master.
Okay. Um, So that's right. You're like the youngest judge at the Adventurers League in DragonCon. Is that correct?
I was a couple years ago when I did it. Obviously, last year due to COVID, I didn't go. But the year before, yeah, I was. I was at the time 14, almost 15.
That's amazing. That's that's totally amazing. I love it. That's younger than when I started, so I think you're off to a good start. Um, so you had some really specific questions about how to create NPCs and how to inhabit them. Let me ask you real quick, how do you do it when you're running a game? How do you inhabit your NPCs and make them come to life?
Um, I do it in three different ways, depending on or a few different ways. I don't know the exact number, based on what type of NPC it is. So I usually generally I'll have four like archetypes, right? And a fifth depending on how advanced the campaign is. So the first is your noble. So that's your lord, your king, queen, whatever it may be. Generally, I like them to be very posh, very like, obviously, if it's a king, he can be a little bit more flowy and a little bit more casual. But if you're a lord or a baron, which is generally what my adventures will start with, they're very posh, very formal. They're very particular in their words. Um, the second type of NPC I have is the barkeep. I have an entire section for him or her because they are, in my opinion, the most important NPC in any one of the campaigns I run, with the exception of the villain. They are 90% of the time Scottish, about 60 to 70% of the time Dwarvish. But apart from that, like, they're very just, hey, I like you guys, you're cool, let's get a drink. The third is going to be your magic shop or your shop owner, selling stuff. They're very, very suave, very kind of slimy sales pitch. I like those guys to be where I really have the essence of I kind of improvise a lot with them because they have this sales pitch that they kind of have, and they're just trying to sell and talk as much as possible, trying to just get stuff out the door and get as much profit as they can. And then obviously my last one is my villain, who uh, is very daunting or very kind of a much more angry person. Obviously, the villain, right? He's I will beat you up. He is always of the mind that he is much more powerful than the adventurers, and the adventurers are almost puny to even and stupid to even try and challenge him, and yet he probably will still go down. So that's just the way I do it, and then from there I just improvise the rest.
I think that's wonderful, and I think honestly that's all you need. Having NPCs in your pocket that you can just kind of pull out and, well, okay, I'm going to do this guy or this guy or this gal or whatever, is the key. Now, but are you wanting to? But I'm sensing from you that you wanted something to a little bit more refinement, a little bit more.
Yeah. So, for those of you who don't know, I play in a game where Rush DMs called, what's it called?
Lacuna.
Lacuna. It's called
Mhm.
Lacuna. And it's like a spy game. And Rush, you have this couple of NPCs that I would never have even thought to even create, right? Like the grandpa on the bike, or the old lady on the side of the road, right? Or even Katie, who is one of our other players' kind of main NPCs. You're very like particular. You know pretty much everything that's going to come out of their mouth to the word, or at least it seems like it to me. And I just kind of wanted to know how much of that do you plan? How much of that do you improvise? And if you do improvise, how do you make it seem like, okay, I've got a plan here. I know exactly what's going on.
Well, a lot of it is improvised because when you have an NPC out there, the PCs could do or say anything. So you're having to make up what the NPC, how the NPC reacts. And there's no way I can anticipate everything that everyone's going to do. So yeah, a lot of it is improvised. The way I do NPCs is I think about who the person is. I think about what they look like, and that's actually important. And I'll tell you why in a minute. I think who the person is, what they look like, and then what they're about. And by when I say what they're about, it's a combination of their motivation and what they do day to day or in the moment. So if I have a shopkeeper, the shopkeeper might constantly be putting or arranging things or organizing things, as they're talking. And then I couple that with the motivation. So maybe they're a very organized person, and they don't like things out of order. So they might do that. And then, okay, so now that I've got that, what kind of voice does that person have? A person who wants to be really organized might have a higher voice, might be more precise with their words, might have a bigger vocabulary. So they might be, oh goodness, I'm so glad that you've come. Just give me one moment. All right. Yes. Now that I have that all arranged, uh, what can I help you with? That sort of thing. It's those three things. The appearance comes into play because, for example, in the game that we're running, there's a guy running control. So in the game of Lacuna, it's like very much like the Matrix. You go into this other place, they put little induction nodes on your temples, and there's somebody who's watching over everything you do, just like in the Matrix. Well, their NPC is a shorter guy. He's got his hair cut really short and he's got big thick glasses. So when I inhabit him, I'm kind of like hunched over, and my eyes are a little bit bigger because he's sort of a nervous computer guy who's really into monitoring his screens and data and that sort of thing. So that's how his appearance comes into my role play. I will say too, Dallin, that not every NPC that I make is super distinct. There was a point in time in which I did make all my NPCs really, really distinct, and that was just a different time in my life. I'm not in that place anymore. If I had, I think, more youthful energy, I could probably do that. But not every NPC that I have has a distinct voice, but certain ones, especially if they're very important, I try to do. So just to review, I think we said appearance, motivate, what they're about, and then what their role is. Is that right? Did I sum it
Yeah,
right? Okay.
yeah, pretty much.
Okay. Do you have any questions on that?
Not really. Except for how how far in do you plan your NPCs? Like, say I'm say like my world, right? I had this fisherman village. They ended up only staying in that village, but I kind of tossed around with the idea of having them go to this bigger city. Um, would you plan out that bigger city, or would you kind of say, okay, well, now we're kind of starting to wrap up the storyline here in Unicross. Now, for this next session, we're probably going to need the city. This is what the city needs to be in terms of the story. Or would you rather just kind of adapt the city to what the story needs?
That's a wonderful question. That's a really, really excellent question. So I do a wide range of things. When I develop a campaign, there are certain NPCs that, yes, I develop pretty thoroughly, um, for various reasons. One, it might be fun. I start developing this character, and just as a writer or whatever, I get intrigued by this character, so I end up writing this long backstory for them, and that's just part of the fun of it. Another reason I might is that, okay, this character is very important to the city or the place that he or she or they are located. Um, what if, for example, it's going to be like, say, the lord of this village. Maybe that person is going to be giving the party a lot of missions. Well, they need to have a thorough backstory because they're going to be interacting with the NPCs quite a bit. I mean, I'm sorry, the party quite a bit. So I need to know a little bit more about their family and their background so that they can have a broader range of reactions. For me, a passing bartender who's not important might have an accent and a few details jotted down, but that's it. But this guy who's going to be interacting with the party for a long time, yes, he's got to have a longer backstory. Now, here's a third thing that I do, which is, let's say we're playing and the players really latch onto a certain NPC. Well, then after the session's done, I'm going to start fleshing that NPC out, right? And this pays off really, really, really well because it becomes truly an interactive storytelling exercise, right? Because then the players are honestly kind of creating their end by because they like this particular character or they don't like the particular character. They have all these motivations and feelings, and now you can reciprocate them. And so it really does become a much more cooperative exercise in that case. So, for example, um, in the game that we're playing, Chuck wrote up this big, long section about Katie. So what I did was I'm like, okay, Katie's obviously very important to Chuck's character. I'm going to develop this character more. I'm going to decide what happened to her because they separated when they were kids. What has she been doing in the meantime? What is she doing now? What are her motivations? And then again, what is she about? How do her motivations interact with her environment? So that's what I did for that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I
Um,
think probably the thing that really reminds me of is if you've ever seen like Critical Role Campaign 2, Pumat Soul was like this random kind of furball shopkeeper with this kind of silly voice, and he had like this weird quirk where he was kind of cloned, and the players just loved him like more than anything else. They kept coming back to him throughout the campaign. And so he had this whole. He even got to the point where the Matt Mercer, he actually talked about it in an interview. Like he had to create how he became a clone because he knew that his players would try and follow that path. So he had to kind of create the story of how he got his magic powers, which I thought was like so weird. Just thinking about all that.
that's exactly how it goes, where you have a particular character, they spark interest in the party for some reason, and then you develop it further. Here's another example. In Rise of the Rune Lords, that adventure path, this is not a spoiler by any means. In the very first chapter of that adventure path, um, there's a young girl who comes on to one of the party members who's big and strapping. It says kind of specifically anybody who's like big and strapping or whatever. She comes on to that person, and then her dad barges in on the whole scene. Well, the player reciprocated, and it kept going and building and building and building, and eventually the girl and the guy got married. They even had a kid, and the the main character the ended up having to give his firstborn child to the Fae in this long series of events. So there you have this major storyline, which started off as a little tiny, haha, this is kind of funny thing, right? It's not written into that module series to be a big event. It's not written to be a major milestone or chapter. It's this little tiny detail, but because the player invested in it so much and I reciprocated, it turned into a huge component of the campaign. Um, springboarding off of that, what you said about cities or going to somewhere else, what I typically do is I'm like, all right, I do want them to go to this bigger city, and then I'll develop a few NPCs that they're going to run into when they're in the big city, right? And I do it the same way. Like, well, this person's fairly important, so they'll have a big background. And then while they're in the city, maybe the party members will run into a few people that they really like, and that's when I'm going to flesh them out more. Does that make sense?
All right. Yeah, sure. Um, so I DM for a group of high schoolers,
Hmm.
which inherently makes for a much more chaotic game. And so what I love is when I talk to people about the fact that I have a ton of rogues and bards, they're like, "Oh yeah, of course you have a bunch of edgy rogues. You're all teenagers." But what it really is it's them playing characters that are chaotic,
Hmm.
and rogues are just the best way to steal things. So my next question for you is when the players arrive at whatever city, even if it's not a big city, and of course they say, is there anybody I can pickpocket? Or is there anybody I can kind of try and scam, essentially, is what they're trying to do. How do you balance letting them do their thing, but without like, for instance, especially in like one of the more richer parts of town, these guys are going to be carrying some significant jewels on them that I don't want my level 3 party having access to.
Okay, I love it. I love it. In fact, I think this should be probably our next thing that we talk about. So I'll talk about it a little bit here so that we don't like just no, well, shut the door on that one. But I think we should make this that whole other episode on its own.
All right.
But one thing you can do that's really useful is if you want, if there are certain NPCs you want the party to run into, maybe they pick the pocket of that particular NPC, and instead of the NPC being mad about it because you want them to meet, hey, they meet later at a different tavern. I think you stole some things from me. I'm pretty impressed. As a matter of fact, somebody of your skill, I can offer you much more than what was in that pouch. I mean, that's nothing. How about this much money or something like that? So that's a great
Yeah.
way for you to meet. Or let's say you want this person to be a rival or even an enemy. You pick their pocket. Now they have it out for you. They're mad. Um, you pick someone's pocket. You get a lot of riches. Now the thieves guild in town is really upset that you have not given them their cut, and so now the thieves guild comes and visits you. So whatever the PCs do, whatever the party does, their actions have consequences, right? You can go break into a villager's house and beat up an old lady and take all her stuff. That's not a problem. I mean, that old lady is not going to put up much of a fight. She probably has one hit point to her name. But then what happens after? Now you go to this next village and all of a sudden you have this terrible reputation. Well, we heard that this is what you did. We're not going to serve you any food. We're not going to allow you to, stable your horses here. So everything the PCs do has a consequence. Um, and so we can definitely talk more about that next time. There is also, I do want to leave people with this, and I've had to tell people this. Okay, you're welcome to do what you're saying you're going to do, but at that point, you will write yourself out of the campaign. We will no longer be following you. Your character will go off on their own adventures, but those won't be the focus of this game. We can run another game some other time with your character on a solo basis, but we're not going to focus on that. And that's for people who go way off of the deep end. Like,
Yeah.
I want to set fire to the entire building, and then as people are running out, I want to kill them.
You have no idea. I literally have had to make my taverns fireproof.
No, I know, I totally understand what you're talking about, and it's what we call um, the Grand Theft Auto syndrome,
Mm-hmm.
because I mean, and it's natural. The first time you ever play any kind of role playing game, you're like, wait, I can do anything. I can strip off all my clothes and run down the street. I can, you know, swing in the chandeliers if I want. This is something I've never experienced before, so why not try it out? And so that doesn't surprise me whatsoever. For a lot of new players, because D&D is growing exponentially, as you know, we see that a lot. We see that a lot
Yeah.
because it's just exploded so fast. But let's cover that next time in a lot more detail.
Yeah. Definitely.
So, I yeah. If any other questions on building NPCs?
Yeah, so I my villain. So NPCs are not just shopkeepers or lords. They're also villains. Villains are also primary NPCs. And last time we kind of touched on the fact that everybody needs a motivation and everybody needs that kind of idea. But how much impact would you say a villain should have if the party does nothing? So, say like I had planned for, villain is here, and party was kind of going to eventually run into him, and that's going to be where the big main plot line came. But instead, they decided to screw around in town and do whatever, which is fine, right? Just kind of take some downtime. Okay, but now this villain is going to take over this town and this town and this town, and suddenly the villain has pretty much captured almost all the towns. So now, whenever a player wants to, whenever the players want to go to a new town, it's a ghost town because all the people are dead and races undead. So and that's just not fun. So how would you kind of accommodate that?
Um, okay. If the PCs are doing this or that, and they're not really paying attention to what you're hoping to be the main plot, okay, and that's a whole nother conversation in of itself because
Sure.
you can have a true. I've run games that have been true sandboxes where literally I put the map out and I said go wherever you want. Literally do as you wish, and that actually worked. Now I've seen that blow up and self destruct, but um, that can work. But some GMs are like, no, there's a plot I want to weave and I want people to participate, and that's also fine. So let's go with the latter. Remember last time we talked, I said imagine what would happen to the world if the villain had his or her or their way, and the PCs were not interceding. Like you said, they start taking over villages. The villages are full of undead. Okay, the party should be getting hints and notes about these things that are happening as they're kind of putzing around. People are streaming in from the countryside. It was awful. Our village was attacked and all the people died horribly. And oh my goodness, my dog, my poor dog got turned into a skeleton right before my eyes and tried to bite me. Um, so that should start happening. Now, if they continue to ignore, I personally would not keep knocking over outside villages. I'm going to have things intrude more into the PC's life. So they go to their favorite tavern and there's an attack of skeletons. Suddenly the NPCs that they like come to them and say, isn't there something you can do? I mean, there are these horrible creatures roaming the countryside. Please help, So I'm going to constantly be reminding them that bad things are happening. And at a certain point, that would be sooner rather than later, something really, really bad is going to happen. Like your village, your city, whatever is the next to be attacked. There are still like 50% of the villages out there are still untouched, right? So there's still somewhere to go. But the place where you are sitting and standing and staying is attacked and attacked horribly. Now what do you do? That kind of thing. So so that's my answer to that. The world should be intruding on the player characters because that's what the world does in real life, right? In real life, if you go and ignore your bills, your rent, school, job, whatever, things are going to start to happen, and they're going to start to snowball, and you're not going to be able to ignore them, right? Things are
Yeah.
going to happen in such a way that, okay, now you have to do something. So that's my answer to that.
All right.
And real quick about villains, I would say remember that every villain should have a different motivation, right?
Yeah.
Right. So maybe this villain wants power, maybe this villain wants revenge, maybe this villain really thinks that they're doing something good. They're just totally misguided. Maybe this villain is a sociopath, so it's not that they want power or anything like that. They just have no moral compass.
They're just having some fun.
Hmm?
I said they're
Right,
just having some fun.
right. Maybe they're just having some fun, or maybe they honestly don't see anything wrong in what they're doing.
Yeah.
They're just like, why wouldn't anybody do this? So yep, cool. Any other questions? All of these things have been fantastic.
I don't think so. I think that's what I got on NPCs for today.
Okay, so to review, to inhabit what you did, the suggestion that you gave was, I thought, fantastic. I even liked how you put you had four archetypes for NPCs. So I like that. So that's one review point for sure. Another one we said was to inhabit NPCs, think what they look like, um, what is their role in society, and what are they about? Meaning, how does their motivation and what they're doing and the role in society interact? Um, then we talked about a little bit about NPCs, which NPCs to flesh out, which NPCs to give a full history to, which to give a small history to, and how that happens. And then finally, we talked about parties running into NPCs, liking them, and then fleshing those out. That
Yeah,
does that about cover it?
that
Yeah,
about covers it.
yeah, we wandered into the Grand Theft Auto syndrome, which I think we should talk about next time. Great topic, really good topic. Um, and then how what your villains do. Okay,
Yeah.
so great talk. Really good session. Um, everybody should like and subscribe, all that sort of thing. And I will see you next week.
Yeah. See you next week.
All right.